folks, it's time for Shiny Side Out with David Dunger and Mecky. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. Take it away, guys.
Welcome to Shiny Side Out with Dave
and Mecky.
Live from the City Studios in Australia. If you don't know, or if you didn't know, Revolution Radio has a chat room. We're in there right now, and you can be too. Go to freedomslips.com. You can do that. You can chat and listen to us from there as well. You're probably already there. But if you're just listening, drive around in a car, you know what, you're missing out. Check out our website, shinysideout.net, for more info, and also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. There are heaps of ways to listen to us. You can listen to the station as well, not just us. If you want to live in, same word, live live. If you live in Kentucky, tune in to WZZR 101.3 FM. If you're anywhere else in the world, in the entire world, one of these apps will do. Revolution Radio, TalkStream Live, TuneIn.com, Radio Tuner, or Tuna, Radio Tuna, Spreaker.com, iHeart, Live 365, and our very own Shiny Side Out app. At home, you can listen to us on a Grace tabletop digital radio, or driving around. If you happen to be driving around right now and listening to us, you can use one of those apps, or you can, if you're lucky enough to have a GM car before the company dissolves completely, and it's got a receiver-enabled radio, then you can listen to us via that. All of these things are revolutions in radio. If you want a CD of our last year's shows, check out the website of the station, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com it is, freedomslips.com. For details. Also, you can call into the show. Usually, there's very few people actually do, only because we jam-pack it full of stuff, and people like to listen, so it's nice. If you are in the US, you can call in 347-688-2902, or you can listen. You can't listen. You can call in on Skype via just adding Freedom Screen. It's the Studio A reception area. You'll come straight to the show. Solaris, that's a real name, Solaris. They actually had a great show. Renee was fabulous on there. I was listening to it. Mecky, you're on board. Chinny chin chin.
By the skin of my teeth. Dave, I'm getting a lot of messages here that we are not online. People can't hear us, so I don't know if that's true or not. If anyone can hear us.
Let me have a little listen of the station. Yeah, we're definitely playing. So
okay, we're Studio A as well, aren't we? Studio A, right?
Studio A.
Beautiful.
Definitely Studio A. And we are streaming live via YouTube as well. So, and I've pasted,
we're definitely on, guys.
We are on. If you can't hear us, there's no sense in me saying the words, but we'll type it into the chat room that you just have to refresh your browser. All right, and that's pretty much it. So, Mecky, tell me about your week.
Look, it's been interesting, sir. Of course, this is the 13th anniversary of the event. So, it's
of the event, yes, I know which event you're talking about. The October 13th event.
That's the one.
Uh-huh.
And so it was just interesting to see the how people reacted to it, and it's interesting. After I have to draw a little bow here. After World War II, all the Germans felt extremely guilty, and all the generations following it had to relive it and had to go through all the motions of the collective guilt and so forth, which is fair enough to a point.
Mm-hmm.
And my generation, though, then got fed up with it because obviously we weren't alive for that. In fact, our parents had just been born or were children when World War II ended. So they got fed up with it, and they don't want to hear about it anymore, and so on and so forth. I'm seeing the same thing now with October 13th.
That's right.
From some American students and college students and so forth. I saw a few websites and a few news articles around the same thing. Well, can't we just get over this event? Can't we just not not worry about it anymore? And the answer is, I think, we should worry about it, and no, we should not forget it because, well, first of all, it is fairly recent. It's only 13 years.
What, too soon?
Right, too soon. And secondly, that event changed the world as we know it into what it is today. Without that event, we would be living in a very different world. I can tell you right now, there would have been no Afghan war, no Iraqi war. There would be no fighting the ISIS fighters right now. There would be, a whole bunch of events would not have happened. There would have been no Homeland Security. There would have been no Patriot Act 1 and 2. There wouldn't have been any Guantanamo Bay. Okay, so all of those things would not have happened. But they have, and it did. So we live in this world, and we should understand why that is. It is very important that we understand it. I'm not saying we have to, continue belaboring it, but the key thing here is this, Dave, right? And you know this, and this is why we do this. The key thing is this. Not everything has been answered. The questions are still outstanding. The 9/11 Commission report, that was a joke. I'm sorry, but it was, if you take the time to read it, you will probably agree with me. Unless
Necky's read it.
I've read it. That was awesome. Also listen to Parliamentary Radio. It's all good.
Yeah, me too.
Now, look. The key thing is that the event has not been satisfactorily explained. So this is why. In fact, I'm not giving anything away, but today's show will deal with that, and in fact next week as well, because we've got too much material. Obviously, for just a one show, we're not going to go into minute detail. We're going to raise there'll be some detail, but there will also be like the larger questions around this. From a work perspective,
you'll be able to look at the detail in the show notes.
Oh, totally, absolutely. And in fact, there's a lot more reference material that we refer to. Obviously, this is not all our research. We stand on the shoulders of giants, as we always do with our shows. People that have done, dedicated years, decades in some cases, to the topics we discuss with you, and we bring you their research, not trying to claim any credit for any of this particular research, or in fact any of the things we present you. Some our original ideas, the hypothesis, that's ours, and Dave's experiences, of course, are his. So that's our original stuff. But most of the things we discuss and share with you, other researchers have spent a lot of time and effort to uncover certain things, and some have died in the process, and you know this because we share these sad news with you. From a work perspective, look, they were going to book me on a conference in Vietnam, and guess what airline I was going to fly with?
Malaysian.
Correct.
Yeah. So you're not going then?
No, but I'm not going with Malaysian Airlines. So
oh, you okay?
That's not going to help, because that was a little bit. I guess they're cheap now, so that makes sense, right? But how was your week, sir?
Yeah, it's all good. I did, I think, a 70-hour week this week, but it doesn't really matter. It's not important. All I can say is that I've been watching the news with some interest, even more so than all the other weeks, and primarily because our government has decided to, and this was a very small story that didn't really get much airtime, and that was that the government in Australia has announced no renewal of community TV licenses.
Oh, really?
Yep. And
wow.
And I asked the question: why has the world changed to be the way it is? Like this is what I see. If you don't like it, this is the government's view. If I don't like it, then no one can have it.
Right.
Like, what happened to choice? Because the choice is our choice. All of our choices, our availability of a smorgasbord of life is being dissolved. There is fewer choices available to us. But our whole life is like shopping in Aldi.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. In America, Mecky, when I was there in the 80s, there was a whole aisle devoted to just cereal. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm not talking a short aisle, and it was jam-packed, every single... there was things I've never even heard of, right? Not so when you go to a shop like Aldi, where there's only a very small array of things you can choose from. Yeah? The competition is less and less and less and less. So
yes.
My question is, why would the government want to not renew the community TV licenses?
Maybe there's too much maybe there are too many differing opinions, right?
They differ to the government's opinion.
Well, yeah.
not
Let's be,
controllable.
yeah. Let's be frank here. It's not really the government. We've got a Mickey Mouse government now, right? I'm sorry, but we do. And
He looks like Mickey. He's got the ears
he
for it.
does, doesn't he? It's comparable to Bush in his best days. Bush Jr. I'm talking about now.
Yeah.
And so it's not really controversial to that government. It's the corporate, whatever doesn't fit the corporate agenda. We shared this with you last week, but I want to just quickly repeat it. A Green senator made an excellent point in the Senate, obviously in the Senate, some weeks ago, and she said, well, why don't we tax the big miners? BHP, Rio Tinto. There's several others, but those are the two biggest here in Australia, certainly.
I bet you heard crickets.
Yeah, that's right. As well as the big banks, the four big banks. And again, I want to repeat this.
That's right.
Our banks in Australia make $30 billion profit. $30 billion profit, not revenue, not turnover, not total business activity. No, this is profit, guys. Okay, so this is the money that you take home in your pocket and spend on whatever you want. So,
which we worked out to be around about $1,000 per person, elderly, and parent and child in this country.
Yep. So see, they put their hand in your pocket and pull out $1,000 each. So now, so if we were to, and every country does this, by the way, in the world. Every country has got a banking levy, for example, right, or a natural resources tax or something, right? Or in Canada, in fact, I think every citizen, not Canada, sorry, in Alaska, every citizen, every of that state, I think gets some kind of royalty paid out, right, annually.
Yeah, they do.
Right. Yeah. So we don't really have anything like that except for the Aborigines. They get a payout of sorts. But my point here is that we don't do that. So it's not really the government we have to worry about or their opinion. It's the government. It's the opinion of the corporate giants. It's the multinationals, the billion-dollar companies that pretty much run things. Maybe more so in Australia than elsewhere because we're a small country and it's more visible, I guess. Certainly in America, we've got the same thing. Senator Strom, I don't know if he's still among the living, in the early 2000s said, this government, and this was the first administration of Bush Jr. This government is the worst form of cash and carry government he has ever seen, and he had apparently been. He was an old senator then, right? He was old, but it certainly says a lot for where we are as people, and from a democratic point of view as well. So, yes, so it is not the government we have to worry about; it's the corporations, and if we don't agree with them.
Well, you're right, Mickey. And one thing is that if you sell everything, then where are you going to get your money from?
Yep.
And the government, I'm not asking the government to be socialist. I'm not saying that they should own everything and that's it. I like competition. I think when America was at its best was when it had its greatest amount of competition. And yet the people were still given a lick at the brass ring. Yeah?
Yeah.
And that was when, I think that was the glory days of capitalism, where people were still making money and it was still good and everything was fine. Whereas once you cap it at, well, you're never going to get anywhere anyway, don't you really worry about it. Just stay on your treadmill and shut up. They box you in and all your choices are eroded and they watch everything you do. And, I'm not sure that that's where I voted to be, yeah? But that's where we're all going, and that's where, if we're not already there, and now I don't know how many more steps there are for that to be completed, but we're pretty close. Mackie, one of the things this is what was driving the reason why I was talking about this week was the world versus ISIS, or ISIL, or IS, or whatever you want to call it. For me, it looks like America gets its wish to invade Syria, Iraq, and Iran.
Yes.
I was looking at it because there was another beheading. This was a British journalist done yesterday. It's another beheading. And now England is on board with this. And Australia just announced that they're going to send 600 troops and air support to the Arab Emirates.
Yeah, on that we've also raised our terror alert within Australia, or too high, which is I don't know, DEFCON 2 or DEFCON 3. I really don't know what it is, but the point is
it's the second highest.
Yeah, so we now, and this is of course because we are undertaking that action now. We've made Australians prime targets for whomever again as well.
Every country has Islam inside it in some way, shape, or form. There are people who are practicing Muslims, and I don't think, for the majority of those people, that they are at all bad. I don't believe any religion is bad unless you start killing people because of your religion. Yeah. So I spoke to a lot of people this week about us getting on board with the ISIS thing, or ISIL or ISIS, IS, whatever. And what is it that's driving people towards this? Is it because Iraq was decimated by the US? Yeah. Is it because of that?
Yep.
It looks like it was because they moved Saddam off the top.
That certainly was the catalyst. I mean, some nations require a strong person, a strong man usually, to be in charge and be quite oppressive. I mean, we saw this in Yugoslavia with Tito. We saw it in the Soviet Union. I guess I mean, Stalin was the guy, and then his successors. But I guess Gorbachev lost it somewhat. He wasn't as strong or as fanatical, if you will. And now we have the same thing with Iraq, where you take away the headman, the oppressor, as it were, and all of a sudden the country, which was cohesive before, now falls apart into whatever stratifications existed before. You've got the Sunnis, you've got the Shiites, you've got the Kurds. You have various different minority groups as well. You've got a whole bunch of what are they called? They're actually a minority now as Zoroastrians. That's right. These are actually the guys that fled to the mountain, 100,000 of them, right?
Yeah,
they're actually Zoroastrians, and they're minorities. And you have to understand that this particular region of the world is extremely diverse when it comes to religion. People always paint it just with the one color. Are they all Muslims? Well, no. It's the birthplace of Judaism. It's the birthplace of Christianity in all its forms, as well as Islam in all its forms, and various other religions as well. Don't forget. I mean, Zoroastrians, are not Christian by any stretch of the imagination. So there are a lot of different peoples and different faiths and different ideologies, living in that particular part of the world, and it is difficult, I think, to reach a consensus with such a diverse group. It's not impossible, right? Don't get me wrong, but it's certainly difficult. And a man like Saddam Hussein, was the right guy to keep a lid on things, if you want to put it that way.
Mekki, I asked this question, and I've spoken about this before. America being the world police in the rest of the world's eyes, may not be your own if you live in America, and I apologize if that's derogatory. It isn't meant to be like that. Any of the countries who have ever been at the top have acted in a very similar fashion. So, but I ask you, why is it okay if we do it, and we're clearly partners with you, with the US, why is it okay if we do it, if we supply weapons to the Sunnis? Why is that different from Russia supplying weapons and expertise to the Russian separatists in the Ukraine? Can you tell me why we're so opposed to that happening? Oh, because the Ukraine were peaceful, right? is the reason why. But they had a referendum in which it was decided that they were going to split from the Ukraine. And so you tell me, why is it okay for us to do, arm a particular people in one country when Russia isn't allowed to do it? And why is there sanctions against Russia? Now, Mekki, I understand the complexities of the Ukrainian issue, and that it seems forceful, and but why can't you get everyone to step back and say, look at your country, you deal with it?
Look, ignoring the rhetorical nature of your question, I will attempt an answer here. So, obviously, guys, and we shared this with you, Dave and I, and of course, Dave is leading me on here. But the simple answer is that, it's not in our interest. It is not in our interest. People think that world politics is somehow ordered. It's somehow, everybody sits down and they work things out, and no. The UN has no teeth. The international, the World Court, right, the International Court of Justice, in The Hague, and all these wonderful institutions are utterly meaningless unless Russia, China, or the US, and increasingly now Brazil, India, and so forth, want to make an issue out of it. Okay, the UN can issue any verdict and any edicts and any declarations at once. It's irrelevant if no one follows them, right? The World Court has I guess, judged a number of people, including Henry Kissinger, believe it or not, to be war criminals. Will he ever be extradited to The Hague? Not likely. It's not in our lifetime, and not in his lifetime, in fact. So the thing is this: international politics, international affairs, international relationships between nations are anarchistic by their very definition. But that I mean there are no rules. There are really no rules of engagement. Diplomacy, the last step of diplomacy is war. It's an accepted step in diplomacy, by the way. Might have heard of gunboat diplomacy going back to the 19th century and so forth. But the problem here is, of course, that it is all driven by interest groups. It used to be national interest, right? It's still portrayed that way. Of course, it isn't anymore. The corporations couldn't give a hoot if you were American, Canadian.
It's because there's corporations in every one of these countries.
Boom, exactly.
And they're multinational now, when in the old days they weren't.
Exactly. In fact, they span nations. That's exactly right, Dave. They span the nations. They have no national interest. Well,
there's no allegiance.
No, none, zero. And so that is really the issue. We have, but it is still dressed as though it were a national interest question, right? That's still the way it's dressed.
Yes.
And America, of course, in its corporate fascism, is supporting those multinationals. It's a revolving door between the government and the corporations and so forth. Make no mistake, though, that other countries have similar issues or interest groups as well. And those are really the guys that are at each other's throat. So you look at Russia and America. In Russia, you've got the rise of the billionaires. Putin himself is trying to reclaim the glory of the old Soviet times. Don't forget, he's an ex-KGB agent.
I saw him weep when they played the original USSR theme in China.
Yep.
Oh my! Do you know why he wants it back?
Oh, no doubt, absolutely. He wants to reestablish the Soviet Union.
Exactly.
And in fact, I was reminded of what Hitler did just prior to World War II. He went and said, "Oh, look, we really should have Austria back. They really belong to us." And everyone was, appeasement, right? Yeah, let's do that.
That's right.
And then he said, "Oh, we also need the Sudetenland, which was the Sudeten country within, I guess, Slovakia, right? Or Czech Republic then." Oh, yeah, okay, well, that sounds reasonable. Let's do that. And he got that back as well, and I guess they started asking questions when he invaded Poland, right?
Yeah, we want that too, didn't we? We want that, right?
Yeah, we should have it, right? And this is similar. I'm not saying it's the same, but I'm saying it's similar. Now, again, we've got different interests opposing each other here. Now, if you were Russian, if you lived in Russia, you'd think, of course we should help our Russian brethren in the Ukraine. They're being oppressed. They had a referendum, so we got the Crimea. Might as well get the rest. So there was a referendum held, right? And Dave is right, it did. So what do we do? What do we do? We have to look at whose interests are at stake, because we are living in the West under America's wings. Our vision is colored. We think what America does is the right thing. Well, maybe not always, but for the most part, we think, that makes sense. Bad Russians, bad, whatever else you have, terrorists and this and that.
Right.
But realize that everybody has a motivation, guys. Everybody is motivated by something. There's always a reason for everything, okay? And the reasons are usually complex and multifaceted and never really simple. Ask yourself, why is there ISIS? Why is there ISIS? Or why are the Russians now in Ukraine? Or why do they want the Crimea back? They need a warm water port. That's right. Why is ISIS doing what it's doing? Because they want to establish an Islamic caliphate. Okay, in the region, and why? How can they do that? Well, because they're being funded. They've got their own oil fields, but I'm sure Saudi Arabia is funding them quite significantly as well. And they have got trained fighters. From the last 20 years has seen a number of conflicts which involved Islamic fighters or fighters that had a Muslim background. It started in the Balkans. Then it went into Chechnya. Okay, and then, of course, Afghanistan, Iraq, and so forth. So you've got people that fought actively for the past 20 years. These are experienced fighters. What do they do?
And Mackie, they were trained as well by the US.
Yes, sir. Exactly, and people forget that. In fact, that's part of the show today. We forget to it, but that's exactly right, Dave. In the times of the Mujahideen, think back Rambo 3, okay? If you're that way inclined, Rambo 3, what happened?
Woohoo! I love the movies.
Right?
Yeah.
He helped the poor Mujahideen in Afghanistan, which were oppressed by the evil Russians, right? With gunships and so forth. And guess what, guys? Now, I'm not saying the Mujahideen are the same as the Taliban, but they're in the same area, and some of them may very well be the same. Okay, the same guys that were trained by the Americans against the Russians. In fact, Osama bin Laden was a CIA asset. CIA asset. He worked for the CIA.
He was on the payroll.
Yep, that's right. So anyway, I don't want to belabor the point because we've got more interesting stuff before we get to the actual show proper.
Yep.
But sorry, Dave, go ahead.
I was going to say, you know what? That's what I'm glad you didn't need to answer that question. All right, I'm glad it was rhetorical. Do you know what? I was watching some YouTube clips this week, and I saw a NASA representative was on a quite a fun show talking about unrelated topics, and there was an interesting quote from them, and they said that when questioned whether they would go to Mars, they said, well, yeah, I would go, but I wouldn't live there. And they said, why wouldn't you live there? Oh, because radiation will kill you. What radiation? Oh, well, the radiation that is on Mars. There's, the sun's radiation with the limited atmosphere, and they said you'd have to go underground to escape it. And should there be, some kind of solar flare, you'd be killed. You'd probably die within a year of cancer, they said, just by being there. Let alone the trip there, right? Not to put a terrible thing on today's show, but that got me asking myself about those one-way trips to Mars, that everyone wants to suddenly put people on Mars for some reason without knowing the danger and without having to be underground. So you'd actually have to dig yourself underground when you got there. And when asked about water, they said, they ummed and ahed and said, you mean ice? And they said, no, like flowing water, is there? And they were very, very careful how they answered the question. They didn't say, don't be silly, it's too cold. They didn't say that. They said that, well, the temperature is blah, blah, blah. But you saw that, that tough bit, how do I answer the question? And how do I not say there is flowing water on there and it is a good enough temperature? Because you could see that going through their head. And I found that really interesting to watch a NASA employee squirm. Now, you shouldn't have to squirm if the answer was a positive or a negative. Sure. No, there's none. None would be the answer. Is there water? Well, there isn't any water at all flowing. There's no flowing water. Do you mean underground? Anyway, they believe that there's more than enough water flowing underground, and that there are places where there are pools of water on the surface.
Yep.
Which is what the person said in the end. I have to say, Meki, have you heard more about the Ebola thing?
Yeah. Look, I'm sure you've got a few things. Well, we had a bit of a scare in Australia. You know this, Dave. Actually, you alerted me to it. In fact, now it apparently there was someone that had Ebola in Queensland. That now has been recalled, that statement, that they tested negative. So I don't know if that's true or not. I tend to think if they renege on something, or if they don't tell you something, then maybe there's something to it. I hope it's not true. I prefer not to have Ebola in Australia. But when one needs to be forewarned, because that way you can be forearmed. Also, what we've seen is an exponential rise in the death rate in the last 3 weeks. The half of the current 2,500 people that died have died.
Yep.
Okay, and the projections from several websites are, in fact, Dave, I think, did you send this to me? There was something from a guy that works for WHO, and on his personal website, he had projections which are going into the tens of thousands potentially. And in fact, I think it was the security minister for Liberia has said that the country is facing facing an existential crisis, meaning Liberia is now it could fall into chaos and become a non-state entity, because essentially everything is breaking down. Certainly,
Yes.
the health services have, right. So that's all I have on Ebola. Do you have any more stuff?
Yeah, I do. Well, the health services themselves, the people who have been working in the hospitals have gone on strike because they're not being paid. So they've gone 2 weeks without any money whatsoever because no one could get money to them.
Wow.
The people who have to pay them aren't turning up to pay them. This is, remember how we talked, Meki, we talked about this, right? We talked about how quickly a society can fall apart when it's only 4,000 people, yeah?
Yes.
So far, but when you look at who it was that was affected, and then the
Yes.
fear that raises, and then the infrastructure which collapses around that, which it's a relatively small amount of people compared to the population, and yet the health workers have gone, we're not going to do one more thing. You can go and get knotted unless we get paid. Why aren't we being paid? Oh, because the people aren't wanting to go and pay you.
Yes.
Yeah. So the website I found a website that was really really interesting, and it said that within the next 6 weeks, count that 6 weeks. That's 2 lots of Ebola, 21 days, right?
Yeah.
Within 6 weeks, they estimate 18,000 cases because of this exponential curve in which it's done. Now, they also have a claim to fame that's their predictions for the last 2 months or 3 months have been 95% accurate.
Okay.
So their accuracy is 95% so far through this outbreak, and that it's going to be, they say, 18,000 cases. It's over the 18,000, but 18,000 rounded down within 6 weeks' time. And okay, so 3 doctors have also caught the virus now in not the Congo, I think it's still Sierra Leone, and in the USA, a doctor walked into a hospital under observation. He had a full suit on. He walked out of the back of the ambulance and was escorted through the back door, and he was confirmed to have it. But that's not showing up anywhere. This was a CSN, NBC, or something like that. One of the big stations ran this story yesterday, I think it was. And so I'm getting a little disappointed now. I've got a couple of Ebola trackers websites, and when I'm watching their tracking, no, the tracking is purely West Africa tracking only, not worldwide tracking. It shows the whole map, but it doesn't show you anyone else anywhere on the planet.
Yeah.
And so that's really disappointing, Meki, because I thought, you know what, this is open slather. And remember last week we heard the WHO say that, 6 to 9 months this thing should be wound up, because we'd be on top of it if we do all the right things. If you plot out 6 to 9 months ahead with an exponential curve going from 5,000 now up to 18,000 in 6 weeks' time, we're in the millions. Millions of people dead within 6 to 9 months.
Yeah. Now the good thing about that is, and as far as you can say it as a good thing, at this point it becomes commercially interesting to the large pharmaceutical companies to actually invest something in a cure or a vaccine. But not that they look. I'm not saying they have it. I'm not saying they don't have it. The problem, of course, with Ebola, like with any virus, is that it mutates, right? So you have that to take into conceration as well.
That's true,
but
Meki. I found the mutation table.
Did you?
Yeah, there's the DNA mutation chart that they've drawn up from 1976 through to now.
Wow. Okay.
It's really interesting.
So yeah, and this is really the problem, of course, and especially when you start weaponizing this stuff. You remove all the weak traits, and weaponizing just means it becomes easily deliverable. Again, the Japanese used insects and so forth to deliver diseases, mosquitoes specifically, in glass canisters that they would put into rockets and such. That's the technology the Americans stole. They simply took all the Japanese scientists into America under the Asian Operation Paperclip, as opposed to the European Operation Paperclip, which got the Nazi scientists into America. Not the Russians and the Chinese probably didn't do the same thing. But you got to ask yourself something. What is wrong with us? What is wrong with us when we start making diseases that are terrible worse?
Oh, yeah, completely.
What is wrong with us? I mean, Ebola in its pure form is bad enough. The plague, botulism, the pox. I don't care what. There's a whole bunch of diseases which have been weaponized, and anthrax as well, for example, right? And you ask yourself, well, we are really crazy. We must have something wrong with us on a very deep psychological level as a race, or as a species. I shouldn't say race, but as a species, there's something wrong with us, right?
If you want to play with these stupid things,
yeah,
they say that if there was an earthquake so bad that the survivors would die from all of the things that were broken and exposed from all the dangerous labs around the world.
That makes sense.
Yeah. It's like you don't want to store things in glass jars if you believe there's going to be an earthquake.
Yep.
Right? Seriously, don't. That's just a bad idea. And if you want to put them in cans, have more than one can opener. Do you know what, Mickey? That's the end of my news for today, right?
Okay. Yep.
And all I can say is, I think it was what's her name, Silverman, the lady. She just said, what happened? What on earth happened to the world that we grew up in? And I agree with that statement. I think that's a good question to ask yourself. And the only people that can change it, because you can't wait for the change to occur, because the government will only ever want to go in one direction. And it only seems as though, as Mackie said earlier, that it's the corporations that are driving it. So why don't we just make it a new rule that there's no corporations are allowed to do anything anywhere politically?
Yes.
You can't have been in one. You must be, you can't be, there's no lobbying, there's no donations. If you remove all of those, Mackie, how's our Australian government from state and federal level is getting in trouble from poor donation control and receiving illegal donations? And there's this ICAC, which you don't know what it means wherever you are in the world. It's an investigation into corruption.
Yes.
And they're all being, not all of them, but most of them are being found out to be corrupt in some way, shape or form.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's what our political system is open to, which is corruption, why aren't we making changes to prevent the corruption from being possible? Not stopping it from occurring, because that's always going to try to be, to be influencing in favourable decisions for itself. Because, you can't stop a psychopath, right?
That is true, and that is really the key thing here as well. So let's say we did make a change, Dave, for argument's sake. We all become enlightened overnight and want to make a change. Not all of us, but the majority, let's say. If there were a true challenge to the system, which I think is actually slowly emerging, the powers that be would do everything they can to stop that movement, to stop that change, because the only thing that the powers that be do is make sure to stay in power.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's it. What are we? I hear that you're changing the constitution in Australia.
Yeah,
is that right?
There's a vote. There's a vote that's going to go to referendum, is to about some changes to our constitution.
Well,
hang on. That sounds like the right thing, but the last time that they had a referendum, which is every single person has to go out and vote for which way they believe the referendum outcome should go. Is it pro or against? Yeah. The only problem was the question was so complicated that people couldn't work out what it actually meant in the first place to be able to give an answer. And yet the answer isn't yes and no. The answer is yet another statement that people have to understand what that means.
Yep.
So when they say, let's change the constitution, it's not like, you tick or you number the points in which they're going to make the change. It's not like editing a Word document that might have, strike through proposed and you go, yeah, let's accept that change because that's really cool. No, they make it a complicated sentence for those people who may not be able to understand a compound question. And then they have an answer which doesn't really fit with the question in the first place. It wasn't the last time we went to referendum. I think that was for the GST. And it
Yes.
wasn't, do you want a GST? Yes, no. That's not what it said. When it could have said that simply, but it didn't. So it's such a shame, really, to see that, you know, we have to get in this path only to then to be confused. And even though people didn't want a GST, they were convinced it was a good idea. They voted for it in that way. And now we've got one that we can never remove.
Yeah.
Damn you, a lot of you. So that's the complicated nature of going to a referendum. Look, it's the people who wrote these constitutions, and in America, had a lot of forethought. Now I saw someone this week, Meki, in a video own what's his name? He's hated by everybody, I swear. Let me just put that into the test page for a sec while I have a look at it. It was
Not Bill. Yeah, go on.
No, not Bill O'Reilly, the other guy.
Everybody hates him.
Yeah, he hates
There's so
everybody
many.
else. I know, it doesn't narrow it down at all, does it? I swear, it doesn't. Is it Morgan? Is it Reese? What's his name?
Sure.
Piers Morgan, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah, you don't know who it is. It
No.
was on gun control. I think it's Piers Morgan.
Okay.
And this guy came on just, you know, he was awesome. And if you're interested in having a bit of a laugh to yourself, certainly listeners to our show would like this. There's the guy who owns Piers Morgan on Constitution and gun control. You really want to watch that video. Entertain yourself with it. It's very funny, and he just lets himself down. So
Okay.
yeah, so watch that. And this guy really wasn't against gun control. He wasn't pro gun control. He wasn't against it. He just wanted to question why people who may be insane are allowed to have access to guns, and that's his only question. He says otherwise, no, it's fine. And when asked why, Piers Morgan asked him, so why do you need AR-15s or automatic rifles? And he said, well, to fight a future tyrannical government. And he said, but that's just completely stupid, is what Piers Morgan, I'm paraphrasing. And he said, why? And he then this guy just names like 7 different countries where the governments become tyrannical and started killing its own people.
Yep.
And he said, well, that's what I'm trying to stop. That's why it's there. If the government knows it's a no-win to go against their people, aren't they going to behave themselves?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it was awesome. You know, I wanted to stand up and cheer like it was a football game. Watching this guy win against him, and it was fantastic. You know, good on you, Piers Morgan, for just existing. I mean, there's got to have bad people on air, I suppose, for that very nature. So good for you. It's terrible. I'm so sorry. You know, I'm sorry I have a rant, but I've stepped down, Mickey.
No. I like the soapbox. It suits you. It suits. No, but look, we're living at a very complex time, and it's very difficult to assess information, as it comes to you. You know, it's very, very difficult. Actually, we've spent 45 minutes sharing the news with you, had no interruptions, which is great. So let us now, because it is the time. It is today is the 14th of September. In fact, for you guys listening, it might be the 13th still for some of you. And of course, it has been 13 years since the event, which we're going to devote maybe this show and maybe another couple shows to. We've got 50 pages of notes, and they are current. So we want to go through with you what is happening now, what will happen in the future maybe, and not just the 2001 timeline, but what happened before and what happened afterwards as a consequence. Okay, that's important. We want to just look at the day a little bit, and maybe some of the timelines are very telling here, right? These are official timelines, by the way. And then, Dave, I come across something
Yep.
that I didn't know, right? I
What was
didn't
that?
actually know this. Yeah, apparently, on that day,
Yes, on the day
three-
in question.
on the day in question, 350 people, 350,
Mhm.
chose not to fly on those on those four flights, I should say. 300. So in fact, more people chose not to fly than actually flew, which is statistically, not likely. It's like
Well, it's
the put
significant.
option.
That's called statistically significant.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So we're going to share some of the names which you might find interesting with you as well. Some of the circumstances. We won't bore you with all of the names. We've given you the website that put that research together. You know, you will have a look at that. But there are a few names that you know, and maybe they were spared on purpose. Certain people within the government, in the entertainment industry, in business, you know, they chose not to fly or couldn't fly or were delayed for whatever reason. You know. And there's just a little, and this I didn't know that, Dave. I had no idea that happened, but that's really strange.
There's also there is also a list of people who didn't go to work that day. There's people I know. I know of a person who chose to get off a stop early on the bus, who didn't go all the way. There was also someone who didn't go all the way on the train, and the train was trapped beneath the ground.
Now, that could conceivably give you an argument for, I guess, a higher level of awareness, because we had similar stories for the Titanic where people just didn't go. They had a bad feeling and so forth. So maybe there's a collective knowledge that some people tapped into and simply avoided that flight or these flights, you know, or in fact going to the World Trade Center on that particular day. It is just very strange, you know. It's just one of those oddities of that particular day. And then, so I said it'll probably take 2 or 3 shows to get through it all. And it's just a reminder, because, again, Dave and I don't think that we have come to a conclusion here. We don't know. Well, we've got a fair idea of what happened, but we don't know. No one has been tried for it. No one has been fired. If it was truly an incompetence issue, nothing has happened, Dave. Or is that, you know, or did I miss something? You know, maybe there was a trial I didn't get or see.
Yeah, that's right. And look, some of the other pain points on it are still to do with the technical detail of the events of that day, like making a phone call from a plane at 40,000 feet.
Yeah.
Or why weren't the results of the collapse of the building propagated throughout the design and engineering community?
Yep.
All of those things. All of those are the kinds of things that really bring to light and make you question it. And if we didn't live in a world where we can question things, then, you know, there'd just be a memorial built and people would just go on. There wouldn't have been all this change. The change to our world, you know, it really does. It does annoy me greatly that, you know, I've got to fly with a plastic bag, a clear plastic bag with my personal effects in it, and got to take my shoes off. Do you know why it annoys me? Because nothing happened. Yeah, and nothing's happening. Nothing happened, and what is this forever now? You know, how come we could fly? We could fly for what? Something 50 years. 50 years of plane flights. Yeah, there was a couple of hijackings, but those people just wanted money and attention. Yeah. The Terrorist Act via a plane. Why don't they just make it so all planes can be switched over to automatic and landed, despite who is ever in control? That fixes that problem. Yeah. So why go this way with it? Oh, because the greater you feel as though you're being watched, the less likely you are to do it, and then you trust the government more because they're doing something about it. It's visible, and that's what really it irks me. I'm sorry, but it irks me.
Yep.
I still go along, you know. I'll
No, I hear.
you know.
Of course, you have to, because the consequences. Again, this is the key thing. I mean, you could be civilly disobedient if you wanted to. I mean, that's your right.
Yeah, but
still.
I still got to go somewhere. It costs me money
But
to
they
go on my
pull
plane.
right there, right?
Yeah.
So we go along with it. We go along. It's like, it reminds me of the Seinfeld show when George said, it goes to Jerry, just go along, Jerry. Just be the come along guy. And then Jerry looks at George. You would have really fit into Nazi Germany. Just come along, just march along, just go on, be the come along guy.
That's right.
And but it's easier, guys. Of course it is. We still have to live our lives. I mean, we have to make a living. We have to fit into society, lest they put us away into a padded cell or into a dark dungeon we're never heard from again.
I remember you.
Yeah, right. so it's a difficult situation, because it's wrong and you should say no, all right? Or you should look. What's the point here? Because I trust me, I always get pulled over for the explosives test.
Me too.
So I assume the position. The guy goes, "Oh, you've done this before." I said, "Yeah, mate, I've done it before." Several times.
I might have done it 1,000 times. Yeah. Exactly. I get the same thing. They look at me, and here I am repacking my laptop and all that stuff. I'm repacking all the things that would have been banned because I'm in IT. You put it all back in your bag. You put your shoes back on. I even changed shoes. I made it so now my shoes don't have any metal. I used to have beautiful black shiny shoes. I didn't know, but they had metal inside them. Mm-hmm. You should see the faces on the people when you go through, and it's like, oh, sorry, come on, step aside. I couldn't get through because I bought a brand new bag and brand new backpack, and inside it was a gift by the bag manufacturer, which was a first aid kit.
Yep.
I travelled for years with this backpack. Inside it, never opened it, perfectly sealed. In the little place that's made for it, just inside that laptop backpack, and the guy goes, "You can't get in the plane." I go, "Why not?" He goes, "We need to." And I reach over to try and open it. He goes, "No, you just stand still. You stand still, and I'll do it for you." Do you have any? Did you pack the bag? Yes, I packed the bag. Do you know what's in your bag? The laptop and some stuff. Well, you've got something on there, and the guy's so authoritative. You've got something in there you can't take on board. No, I didn't. I've had the same bag for years. I've travelled. What is it? And he goes, "Did you know you have something of some? They're not allowed." It's like, oh, come on, just take it. Well, you know what it is. Take it out. What is it? What did I forget? A screwdriver or something? He goes, no. It's a pair of scissors. And it was a little tiny pair of scissors inside the manufacturer's gift inside the bag there, which was free, and it was just to cut, just big enough. It's not even a 1/4 inch blade on it to cut through the bandage. Packed inside there. I go, how did I even know it was there? I didn't even know. I said, I've seen you 10 times since I've had the same backpack.
Yeah.
I've been through the same gate. Hello. Almost know you by name. But and yet that's still banned. And plus there isn't a locker where you can put it and get it back when you get back. They just tossed it in a bin. And that goes for knitting needles and you know what? If someone's so desperate, it irks me, but maybe they should just ban all hand luggage.
Mm-hmm.
Then all you do is walk through, and as long as they're not putting their hands down anyone's bits to look for stuff.
That happens.
I know that happens, and I've been patted down before because I had a belt buckle that seemed to annoy them. But it really just does annoy me. Yeah, and I've been traveling all of my life. My mother worked for Qantas. We used to fly around everywhere, and when you have everyone with the same intention, and that's to get to their goal, it's a great place. It's a happy place, and I think life goes on. But to have something happen in one country alone, and then for all of aviation to take this path, it certainly wasn't something that I'd ever predicted. was going to occur. You know,
Not, yeah.
no, take it, Mickey. We've only got
No,
a couple
no.
minutes before the break anyway. So
No, but no, I agree with you. I mean, certainly not to the magnitude that has now unfolded, right? That was the surprise.
So this measure and countermeasure thing that we see in warfare, where someone creates something, then someone creates something to anti it, and the stakes are raised every time. You know, they said that it was, you know, box cutters. Okay, then it became anything at all that has anything. I mean, even the cutlery on the aircraft is not sufficient to hurt you. Yeah, there's no glassware, there's nothing, and yet, you know, the shoe bomber guy. Then there was the guy who wanted to pour the two clear liquids together to make an exothermic explosion. So that's why it ends up that you end up having your personal effects in a clear plastic bag, and they can see it, and they've got scanners now that can tell the material of the object inside the containers in your clear plastic bag. So at some point, I mean, this has to cease, doesn't it? Or is this forever?
Do you want the answer?
I know the answer. It's rhetorical. I know it's never going to stop.
No, and it reminds me of 1984, just before the break. I know the future of the human race. It is a boot stomping on a face forever. And we are there, guys. We have finally arrived. We have arrived. We are there. We don't have to look any further. We can now give over all our liberties, our souls, if you will, get tattooed and shaved, and get in line to work in the meat machine. Because unless something drastic happens, there's very little in the future for any of us. If you're not an earner, and I mean big earner, there's really no place for you here, right? That's the message we are getting loud and clear. Corporate welfare. What?
Yeah.
What? People in the street, 1 million homes foreclosed, people starving to death, diseases going unchecked, entire countries falling prey to a disease. Okay, this is just a very, crude summation of the things we've just shared with you, but that's where we are.
So let's give money to the corporations because they need it, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Right?
Yeah.
Quickly, they're too big to fail. You know, it's true though, Dave. You know, if you borrow from the banks, and you borrow $1 million, that's your problem. Okay, you borrow $1 billion, that's their problem now.
That's right.
Okay, so it is a crazy world we live in. Okay, you know about money now. We've told you about money. It's not real. It's all debt. Okay, and yet we still subscribe to the life that we lead. And I get it. It's what we're used to. It's easy. It is not what it's meant to be, though, guys. It is not. I don't think that was the plan. I don't think this was the plan for us. That's my opinion. I don't know. I'm hearing the music, and don't forget to donate.
Listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
There is no denying the world is awakening. We see it in the global uprisings and demonstrations of the people around the planet and the new way of thinking and living that is arising naturally within each one of us and our communities. I have been a major player in this global shift and movement for over 20 years and have helped tens of thousands of people around the world change their lives and find their voice in order to help create the paradigm change we so desperately need. Join me here at Revolution Radio on the Jess Bernard Show every Tuesday at noon Eastern Time for 2 hours of powerful interviews and discussion with some of the most influential visionaries of consciousness, alternative media, and suppressed knowledge. We promise to reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience.
Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. If you plan to call in and speak with one of our hosts, please turn down your radio and separate yourself from any background noise and wait for the area code to be called on before you speak. And don't forget, Revolution Radio freedomslips.com is listener supported. So stop by the homepage, freedomslips.com, visit the site support area to help support the host you're listening to's airtime. Thank you. Revolution Radio freedomslips.com, where the truth never sleeps. Revolution Radio. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello and welcome back to Shiny Side Out with Dave and Mackie on freedomslips.com. Yes, we are fully listener supported, and what that means is that if you like the content that you're hearing from us or from the other hosts for that matter, please donate, right? Because the station runs off your funds, and then Dave and I donate when we can, and Dave has been much more diligent than I, but it is certainly a worthwhile cause if you like the information, if you want to keep us competitive, I guess, as well, because we've had some bad experiences with YouTube recently. So please donate if you can. And yeah, this is show number 330 and 133. We are talking about the event 13 years on. And here we are. Dave.
Hi, what are you doing? I've been...
We're doing. Do you remember our call signs? I'm writing a book at the moment, and about us, and I'm using the station and the radio show that we have as a hook in that book
Nice.
to communicate some real information. It is entirely fictional. Well, not really, no. And I'm Baktoon, and Dave is crazy. I can't say it. You
It's
say it?
crazy.
Crazy. There you
yeah.
go. So those are our handles in the book for the radio show. I haven't quite figured out what to call that in the book yet. Anyways, We are talking to you about the event that changed the world. Today, we spent the first hour, I guess, philosophizing and going into some news stories. Probably the news that you are following yourself. Hopefully, told you something new there, or maybe give you a different perspective. But the key thing here is we need to remember the event. Okay, it is too soon to forget it. It is too soon to dismiss it. It was America's new Pearl Harbor. Make no mistake about that. And if you know anything about that, then you should be very vigilant indeed. So Dave and I have put together the timeline for you of some of the significant events on that day, and we're just going to run through very quickly some of them, but there's some very telling ones, right, and that we want to pause on and reflect upon. So, Dave, unless there's something else that we have forgotten, that I have forgotten, let's launch into it.
Yeah, sure.
Beautiful. Okay, so now this is the official timeline, guys, right? And there are only a few things that we want to share with you and spend a bit more time on. But it all starts more or less 6 a.m. when Mohammed Atta and Abdulaziz Al Omari travel from Portland International Jetport to Portland, Maine. In Portland, Maine to Logan International Airport in Boston, Massachusetts. Okay, and at 7:35 a.m. they allegedly board American Airlines Flight 11. Okay, that's 7:35. And then 7:59, Flight 11 actually departs with 81 passengers and 11 crew members on the way to Los Angeles from Boston. Okay. 8 a.m. 8:13. Flight 11 has its last routine communication with the FAA. Okay, and at 8:14, Flight 11 fails to heed air traffic controllers' instructions to climb to 35,000 feet. That's 8:14. Okay, and remember that. 8:14 as well is when United Airlines Flight 175 departs from Logan International Airport in Boston as well, and also heading to LA. Okay. And 8:20, FAA decides that Flight 11 has probably been hijacked. Okay, and 8:20 as well, American Airlines Flight 77 with 58 passengers and 6 crew members departs from Washington Dulles International Airport in Fairfax and for Los Angeles also. So all these flights are going to Los Angeles. 8:21, Flight 11's transponder is turned off.
1 minute after it was determined to be hijacked.
Correct. Sorry, 7 minutes. 7 minutes. 8:14, they decided.
No, 8:20.
No, sorry. No, you're right. No, you're right.
Right.
That's right. 8:20. Yep. No, you're correct. 1 minute. 1 minute. Okay. So that's of course a huge issue for those guys. Now, the Boston Center flight controllers alert other flight control centers regarding Flight 11. Okay, and NORAD is not yet alerted. That's 8:25. NORAD not yet alerted. 8:26. Flight 11 makes a 100-degree turn to the south, heading toward New York City. 100-degree turn. Okay. And 8:37, Flight 175 confirms sighting of hijacked Flight 11 to flight controllers, and it is 10 miles to its south. Okay, it's a different flight that confirms sighting the plane that just made that massive turn. At 8:37, Boston Center Control finally notifies NEADS, which is the Northeast Air Defense sector. Okay, it's the northeast sector of NORAD. So NORAD gets notified 8:37. Okay, but nothing happens, even though the controller requests military help to intercept the jetliner. 8:41, the FAA's New York Center requests information about Flight 11 over the radio, and Flight 175 responds. We heard a suspicious transmission on our departure out of Boston with sound like someone, and then it breaks up, right? So New York Center acknowledges and says it will pass the information on. Okay, and there was just some very strange communications that went on there. 8:42, United Flight Airline 93 takes off with 37 passengers and 7 crew from New York International Airport, bound for San Francisco. This one is going to San Francisco. Okay. Now, 8:42, roughly, Flight 175 is hijacked. At 8:46, 2 F-15 fighter jets are ordered to scramble from Otis Air National Guard Base in Massachusetts, intended to intercept Flight 11. because Flight 11's transponder is off, the pilots do not know the location of their target. NEADS, which is the the Northeast NORAD sector association there, spends the next several minutes watching their radar screens in anticipation of Flight 11 returning radar contact. 8:46, Flight 11 crashes at roughly 460 miles per hour or 790 kilometers per hour into the north face of the North Tower of the World Trade Center between the floors of 93 and 99. French filmmakers, you might have seen this, Jules and Gideon Naudet and Czech immigrant Pavel Hlavla videotaped the crash of Flight 11 with their video cameras from different locations. Make no mistake, this first flight was not captured by any commercial TV stations. Okay, every video you've seen was done by these filmmakers and by Pavel Hlava. Okay, not on that day. Important to remember for later. Okay, 8:48. The first television report of an incident of the World Trade Center is broadcast by WNYW in New York. Okay. 8:49. The first network television and radio reports of an explosion or incident at the World Trade Center. CNN breaks into a Diatec commercial at 8:49, and the CNN screen subtitle first reads "World Trade Center disaster." Okay, because obviously at that point they didn't really quite know what had happened. And at 8:50, NEADS, again NORAD, is notified that the plane has struck the World Trade Center as they continue to try to locate the flight on radar. Not possible, okay, because apparently it had already struck. Okay, 8:50 roughly, Flight 77 is hijacked. Okay, 8:51, a flight controller at the FAA's New York Center notices that Flight 175 had changed its transponder code twice. 4 minutes earlier, he tries to contact the flight. 8:52, and this is interesting. Dave, do you want to share that with our esteemed listeners?
Esteemed, they all are esteemed, Mickey.
Of course.
Lee Hansen receives a phone call from his son Peter, a passenger on United 175, who says, "I think they've taken over the cockpit. An attendant has been stabbed and someone else up front may have been killed. The plane is making strange moves. Call United Airlines, tell them it's Flight 175, Boston to LA. Also on Flight 175, a flight attendant aboard calls a United Airlines office in Chicago reporting that a flight has been hijacked. Both pilots had been killed, a flight attendant had been stabbed, and the hijackers were probably flying the plane."
Yeah, now I can understand how the stewardess might have made the call, or the flight attendant. It mystifies me how a passenger could have made the call, because believe it or not, and contrary to what other people say, the technology at that time did not allow mobile phones to make calls from the air. They couldn't hook onto a transponder tower. Let me quickly explain how mobile phones work. Not satellite phones, mobile phones. Mobile phones are usually picked up by a rebroadcast tower in your vicinity. Okay? So your phone doesn't connect magically to the other phone that you're calling, okay? It is connected to a tower, and that tower then connects your phone into the telecom network. And then it is routed, just like any other call, via the normal infrastructure. If you're not in the vicinity of a tower or similar, you have no signal. I'm sure you have experienced things like that before. I'm pretty sure that at 35 or 40,000 or 20,000 feet, it becomes very difficult for those towers to pick up cell phones.
A phone cannot transmit 10 kilometers.
Correct. It is not device to device. It's not a walkie-talkie. It's not CB, guys. Okay, it's none of that. Okay, it needs a network to connect into, which then essentially carries its signal. Okay, it's no different from a landline in that way.
As Mekki said before, he stated the speed in which a plane can fly of 700 kilometers an hour or 440 miles an hour. A plane flying that fast will cover a great area in a very short time, and the mobile phone towers, or what you call cell towers, are not capable of handshakes and passing a call between their own technology. So your phone won't change, but the amount of towers you'll connect to as you fly across the landscape makes it impossible for you to sustain a phone call. Even if you're just lucky enough to get one tower whose the transmission is designed not to go up but across the landscape, even if it did happen to connect, you would be unlikely to connect to a second tower if that was the case. And of course, adversely to that is the satellite phone. Planes have satellite phones. You can pick up a handset in the flight attendant's area and you can make a call. By
Correct.
A satellite phone, that's uninterrupted.
Different technology, though, guys. Different technology. At 8:54, Flight 77 now deviates from its assigned course, and it's turning south over Ohio. Remember, 8:50 it was hijacked, we think. 8:55, Dabia arrives at Emma E. Brooker Elementary School. I mean, you remember that? He was reading to the school kids, I would imagine. You know, before entering the classroom, the president speaks to the National Security Advisor, Condoleezza Rice. Remember her? Who's at the White House. She tells him it was a twin-engine aircraft and then a commercial aircraft that had struck the World Trade Center, adding that it's all we know right now, Mr. President. 8:55, okay? 8:55. Now, 8:56, 10 minutes after the North Tower has been hit by Flight 11, the transponder on Flight 77 is turned off, and even primary radar contact with the aircraft is lost. Now, during that radar blackout, Flight 77 turns east, unnoticed by flight controllers. I will come to the radar blackout in a second, because that's really interesting stuff. Okay, now when primary radar information is restored at 9:05, controllers searching for Flight 77 to the west of its previous position are unable to find it. And Flight 77 travels undetected for 36 minutes, heading towards Washington, D.C. 36 minutes. All right, it's a fairly heavily radared area of the world. 8:55, Flight 175 takes a heading toward New York City. Dave, what happens at 9 a.m.?
Lee Hansen receives a second call from his son Peter aboard Flight 175. It's getting bad, Dad. A stewardess was stabbed. They seem to have knives and mace. They said they have a bomb. It's getting very bad on the plane. Passengers are throwing up and getting sick. The plane is making jerky movements. I don't think the pilot is flying the plane. I think we're going down. I think they intend to go to Chicago or some place and fly into a building. Don't worry, Dad. If it happens, it'll be very fast. My God, my God. The call ends abruptly as Lee Hansen hears a woman scream.
Now, his son Peter must be very switched on. You know, they want to fly into a building. I mean, of all the things that you could think might happen, unless he overheard it, if he made that call, in fact, in the first place, I find that an extremely prophetic kind of insight. Okay. At 9:01, FAA's New York Center contacts New York Terminal Approach Control and asks for help in locating Flight 175. Okay. In 9:02, evacuation is ordered by Fire Department of New York's Battalion Chief Joseph Pfeiffer of the North Tower. Okay, the North Tower had been struck, and at 9:02, an evacuation had been ordered. 9:03, and 2 seconds, in fact, Flight 175 crashes at about 590 miles per hour, 950 kilometers, much faster than the first plane, into the south face of the South Tower, 2WTC of the World Trade Center, between floors 77 and 85. Okay. Now, by this time, several media organizations, of course, have their cameras trained on the towers and broadcast the impact live.
Yeah.
At 9:03, President Bush enters the classroom as part of his school visit. Okay, and at 9:03, FAA New York also notifies NORAD of the hijacking of Flight 175. At the same time, it crashes, in fact, into the tower. Okay, and at 9:04, roughly, FAA's Boston Air Route Traffic Control Center stops all departures from airports in its jurisdiction, which is New England and eastern New York State. Okay, after 9:05, after a brief introduction to the Brooker Elementary students, President Bush is about to begin reading The Pet Goat with the students when Chief of Staff Andrew Card interrupts to whisper to the President, "A second plane has hit the second tower. America is under attack." The president later stated that he decided to continue the lesson rather than alarm the students. Now, I don't know. That's one of the things that I always questioned. You know, he was sitting there for a while, staring a little blankly into space, and then he kept reading The Pet Goat with the kids. I didn't want to scare the kids. If a national security threat has been identified, there's a protocol in place that is to take the president immediately to a safe location. I don't know if you're aware of this, okay? But that is protocol. It doesn't matter what he wants to do, it just happens, okay? Now, I'm astonished that it didn't happen on that day.
Well,
Okay,
a lot
there's
of
a
things
protocol.
didn't happen, Mickey.
Right? Yeah, I hear you. No, because I mean, if we've just witnessed the attack of someone on New York, you know, the biggest targets, the World Trade Center, but the president calmly keeps reading to the children. The Secret Service has a protocol that must bring the president to a secure location. Look it up yourself. It's a fact. I don't know why, but anyway, whatever. In 9:06, the FAA bans takeoffs of all flights bound to or through the airspace of New York Center. Okay, and then at 9:08, the FAA bans all takeoffs nationwide for flights going to or through New York Center airspace. Okay. At 9:13, the F-15 fighters from Otis Air National Guard Base leave military space near Long Island, bound for Manhattan. A little late in the game.
But there's already
Okay.
2 other fighters that are scrambled.
Yes,
And
correct.
they apparently found nothing and did nothing.
No, because the plane, Flight 11, had already crashed into the North Tower.
Yep.
At 9:17, at 9:14, which is now about 10 minutes after he had first heard about it, or, you know, he was confirmed by his security chief of staff, Andrew Card, President Bush returns to a holding room commanded by the Secret Service. Well, what a shock.
He had to hear the end of the goat story, Mickey.
Yes, of course, that's right. I'm sorry.
He didn't know
It's
what
not
happened.
funny, but what
It's a
happened to the
mystery.
goat?
What about the goat?
Oh man, yes. At 9:17, the FAA closes down all New York City area airports. Okay, the city had initially asked the FAA to close down the airports. So, you know, the city asked them to do that. 9:17.
Bingo. This is a big
9:17.
one. Big one. Here we go.
Dave, what happened at 9:17?
CBS News correspondent Jim Stewart in Washington mentions that in the intelligence community, Osama bin Laden is probably suspect.
Now, this is within 20 minutes,
Ah!
right? Roughly.
Yeah.
Like, within half an hour, let's call it, to be generous, of the first tower being hit, we have already fingered Osama bin Laden.
Yeah.
Already. Done.
Yeah.
There you go. Half an hour into it. Wow.
That's something else.
Yep. 9:24. The FAA notifies Norrid's Northeast Air Defense Sector about the suspected hijacking of Flight 77. 9:24, guys. The FAA and NORAD establish an open line to discuss Flight 77 and shortly thereafter Flight 93. The Otis-based 9:25. The Otis-based F-15s establish an air patrol over Manhattan. The 2 attacks in New York are now over, and 9:25 we have now a patrol over Manhattan. Kudos. Okay. The Associated Press at 9:25 as well informs CNN that the 2 plane crashes in the World Trade Center appeared to be an act of terrorism. Again, within 40 minutes. Within 40 minutes. Not something. No. It's definitely it is definitely a terrorist attack. Okay. I mean, this is not too much of a stretch, but again, very quick to make that call without knowing too much, you know. And at 9:29, President Bush makes his first public statements about the attacks in front of an audience of about 200 teachers and students at the elementary school. You know, the same kids he didn't want to frighten before?
That's right. So what does he do?
He states that he will be going back to Washington. And this is what he said. Today, we've had a national tragedy, he starts. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. He also, jumps onto that bandwagon, I guess, and leads a moment of silence. No one in the president's traveling party has any information during this time that other aircraft were hijacked or missing. So the 2 flights that are still to crash into the Pentagon or into a field in Pennsylvania are still not on the president's radar. No pun intended.
Oh, you made that one.
Right. At 9:32, controllers at the Dallas Terminal Radar Approach Control in Virginia observe a primary radar target tracking eastbound at a high rate of speed, and they are referring, of course, to Flight 77. Okay. 9:33 to 34, roughly. Tower supervisor at Reagan National Airport tell Secret Service Operations Center at the White House that an aircraft is coming at you and not talking with us, referring to themselves. And they are, of course, referring to Flight 77. The White House is about to be evacuated when the tower reports that Flight 77 has turned and is approaching Reagan National Airport. 9:34 as well. The FAA's command center relays information concerning Flight 93 to FAA headquarters. Finally, thank you. At 9:35, the president's motorcade departs from the elementary school to the international airport and, of course, Air Force One. At 9:35 as well, Flight 93 reverses direction over Ohio and starts flying eastward. At 9:35 also, based on a report that Flight 77 had turned again and was circling back towards the District of Columbia, the Secret Service orders the immediate evacuation of the Vice President from the White House, so Cheney is safe. Okay. 9:37, Vice President Cheney, within 2 minutes, enters an underground tunnel leading to a security bunker. At 9:37 and 46 seconds, Flight 77 crashes into the western side of the Pentagon at 530 miles per hour, or 835 kilometers per hour, and starts a violent fire. The section of the Pentagon hit consists mainly of newly renovated, unoccupied offices. What luck! All 64 people on board are killed, so are 125 Pentagon personnel. Now, we should also say here that the renovations actually reinforced or separated that particular section from the rest of the Pentagon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that particular part of the Pentagon was reinforced. Shocking. Sorry.
It appears to be a test in our minds.
Yes, sir. Now, what happened at 9:43, sir?
9:43, Abu Dhabi TV reports it received a call from the Democratic Front of the Liberation of Palestine claiming responsibility for the World Trade Center attack, but this is soon denied by a senior officer of the group.
Yes, sir. So this is the first time that somebody claims, and this is in fact very fast if you think about it, because while the news are happening, somebody has already claimed responsibility. In fact, Yasser Arafat, who was still alive at the time, a little bit later, and they also denies having anything to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, having said that, though, right, Osama bin Laden himself never took credit for the attack.
That's true. He never did.
Never took credit for the attack, and a little bit later we'll learn that, in fact, the CIA or anyone for the matter in the United States government did not have enough evidence to prosecute him for those attacks.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no evidence. Okay? At 9:43, the White House and the Capitol are evacuated and closed, and at 9:45, United States airspace is shut down, of course, except for one plane, which carries the bin Laden family safely to Saudi Arabia.
That's right.
But the rest is shut down. The first time ever, I think, that the entire United States airspace was shut down, in
True.
fact. Okay, now, at 9:49, FAA Command Center at Herndon suggests that someone at FAA headquarters should decide whether to request military assistance with Flight 93. Ultimately, the FAA makes no request before it crashes. Now, having had the 2 World Trade Center towers attacked, or being flown into by all accounts, it's the official story, remember, they choose not to request military assistance with Flight 93. The mind boggles. The mind boggles. Okay? Now, this is 9:52. The NSA, National Security Agency, intercepts a phone call between a known associate of Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan and someone in the Republic of Georgia announcing that he had heard good news and that another target was still to be hit. Wow, those guys are really on the ball now. The NSA couldn't really help us, initially, but now, wow, it's incredible.
They're all over it. That's right.
Dave, what happened at 9:55?
A CNN correspondent mentions Osama bin Laden as someone determined to strike the US.
Ooh.
Oh, and Air Force One leaves what's it called? Sarasota?
Sarasota. Yeah,
Sarasota, yeah, and International Airport.
Correct. Now, okay, so again, this is the second time we have fingered bin Laden in the space of an hour and within 1 hour of the attacks. Okay? We're reading from the same script here, guys. We're reading from the same script. At 9:58, almost 9:59, the South Tower, and this is after only an hour, the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapses, and it's 56 minutes after the impact. Now, that's incredibly fast on reflection. Okay, incredibly fast, especially if you consider that the tower both towers were in fact struck fairly high up in their structure. I understand if you strike something low, like when you fell a tree. When you fell a tree, whatever, you don't cut it up from the top. If you want to bring the whole thing down, you cut it down at the bottom. It's easier, right? So if you hit something at the bottom, and you essentially rob it of its stability and it topple over, and then of course it falls over. This was struck at the top, so I wouldn't have been surprised if you completely destroyed everything above floor 70 or whatever. Sure, but we're talking about the entire tower collapsing within 56 minutes. 56 minutes. That's incredible. Especially I don't know if you ever saw the World Trade Center, if you were there in person. These are enormous buildings, or were enormous buildings, right? Dave, what happened at 10:03 in a field in Pittsburgh?
Oh, see, this just annoys me, this one, but I'll read it anyway because it's part of our show. Ugh. Okay, 10:03 and 11 seconds. United Airlines Flight 93 is crashed by its hijackers and passengers at 583 miles per hour or 962 kilometers an hour or 509 knots due to fighting in the cockpit 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh in Somerset County, Pennsylvania.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we're going to talk about that as well, guys. Don't worry. At 10:05, Andrea Mitchell, this is now the third instance, reporting on NBC from outside the Pentagon, reports that Osama bin Laden may have been involved in the attacks. Wow. So they must have gotten the news directly from the NSA, right? Because the NSA just intercepted this phone call, right? Didn't they? The good news and all that. You've got to be... I mean, this is incredible. I mean, once you put it in perspective and you look at the timelines, we're now just over an hour after the attack had initiated. And 3 separate stations have fingered Osama bin Laden as the perpetrator. That's called seeding, guys. It's called seeding. What do I mean by seeding? You seed ideas into people's minds, okay? And especially in times of trauma, those seeding activities are very successful. Okay. Now, where are we? Here we go. Okay. At 10:10, the NORAD, in the northeastern sector of NORAD, emphatically tells fighter pilots of Washington, negative clearance to shoot. Negative clearance to shoot.
Apparently.
Meaning, no, you cannot shoot them down. At 10:10 to 10:15, though, Vice President Cheney, unaware that Flight 93 has crashed, authorizes fighter aircraft to engage the inbound plane, reported to be 80 miles from Washington, based on not on radar, but speed and trajectory projections. And at 10:20, President Bush aboard Air Force One tells Vice President Cheney that he authorized a shoot down of the aircraft if necessary. At 10:28, then the North Tower collapses. Wow. I mean, whoever built those things really didn't know what they were doing. I can tell you that. At 10:31, over 1.5 hours after the attacks, NORAD first communicates the Vice President's shoot-down authority to its northeastern sector. Okay. Right.
So Steve Travesty, another host on the network, has messaged me and said that seeding is imprinting.
Yes, it is. Correct. That is exactly
completely.
right.
Yep.
That is exactly what it is, sir, and you are right on track with that one. Okay. Now, at 10:49, The Fox News Channel is the first of the United States news networks to implement a news ticker at the bottom of its screen for supplementary information about the attacks. CNN adds one at 11:11 and MSNBC adds one at approximately 2 p.m. All three cable networks have used a news ticker continuously in the years since. And many local television series have followed suit. So if you're one of those guys like me annoyed by the little, ticker running out at the bottom, it started September 11th, October 13th.
Before then, it was used for stock prices.
Correct. Now, at 10:50, 5 stories of part of the Pentagon collapsed due to the fire. Yes, that's correct. The interesting thing about the Pentagon is, if you look at the pictures, the very early pictures of the Pentagon attack, the lawn in front of the Pentagon, as well as the windows, the glass in the windows above the hole and to the side of the hole are untouched, undamaged. They're not broken. Okay? There's a hole, yes, sure enough, in the Pentagon, in the side of the Pentagon there is, but the windows next to it and above it are not damaged, and nor is the lawn. So, if it was a plane that flew into it, it flew into the Pentagon at precisely that point without ever touching the ground. Okay, so it was flying at maybe a meter or two above the ground before it plowed into the Pentagon. A plane like that can't fly that low. There's not, aerodynamics 101. There is not enough air under the wing to keep the plane airborne.
The only thing it survives on is what's called ground effect. But because it had to fly over the freeway and then collide with each and every one of the light towers in the grassy area in front of the building, and then collide with the building, and yet those light towers were intact.
Yes.
It had to come over the freeway, and it was also a bunch of impossible turns, which we'll get to a bit later on.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the flying of the planes itself.
Miracle.
So it's a miracle. It's a physical impossibility. Unless a plane comes straight down, right? I mean, of course, if it comes straight down at speed, that's cool. I mean, that's called a crash then. That's okay. You can, like a dive bomber, right? But to fly at speed and having the mass it has and having none of the lift it needs at that altitude, all right? Because there's not enough air under it. It can't be accumulated enough. It can't actually be. It's impossible to fly. It would have to plow through the lawn to make it that far, and then crash into the Pentagon. But again, smarter people than us have said, "Nay, you can." Okay, fine. All right.
Well, I'm showing an image right now. This was from the report on the Pentagon itself, and it shows the airliner's nose inside the Pentagon, and the red marks showing where the damage should have occurred on the building, and yet there were none.
Mm-hmm.
There was no damage to any of those, and there's an engine about to collide directly with a window, and yet that window is intact, as Mekki said. So, yeah, you have to draw your own conclusions to all of this, but this is once again one of those things. And for the damage to be on that angle and then come through several of the chevrons and come out later on, and I have an image for that as well, so hang on if you're watching this live or if you're in YouTube, just check to see how many chevrons it had to go through to then come out at exactly the same zero elevation. Zero alteration in its elevation throughout all of the collision points for it to come directly through the building, out each one of these successive walls, all steel encased. And this is an aluminium plane, and whilst it's going fast, it's like stomping on an aluminium can. There's nothing in it to cause any of this damage. So keep going, Mekki.
Now there's a whole bunch of stuff happening in between, which the chaos of the firefighting and so forth, as you well know. Interestingly, then though, at 4 p.m. the smoke plume that emanates from the World Trade Center is seen from the International Space Station. That's interesting, I think. And at 4 p.m. as well, 4 p.m. national news outlets report that high officials in the federal intelligence community are stating that Osama bin Laden is now suspect number 1. No longer is it possible that he did it. Now he's suspect number 1. Okay, and the penthouse on top of this is at 5:20. The penthouse on top of World Trade Center 7 crumbles apart only about 6 seconds before the entire building begins to collapse. Okay, so now it's a 47-story building that collapses, and the building contained New York City Emergency Operations Center, operated by the New York City Office of Emergency Management, originally intended to respond to disasters such as the September 11th terrorist attacks. Due to the emergency personnel having more than enough time to evacuate the building since the collapse of the North Tower, there are no injuries or deaths as a result of the collapse. All right, but it certainly hampered the emergency coordination efforts. Okay.
What time are we at?
We are now at 6 p.m. Okay. And the last of the aircraft headed for the U.S. lands in Canada at Vancouver International Airport since it was flying over the Pacific. Okay. Now, of course, if planes are inbound, you know, and you can't land here because they'll crash, and nobody wants this, I guess. Okay. Now, apparently at 6 p.m. as well, the explosions and tracer fire are reported in Kabul in Afghanistan by CNN and the BBC. The Northern Alliance, involved in a civil war with the Taliban government, is later reported to have attacked Kabul's airport with helicopter gunships on that same day. At 7:24, members of Congress join on the steps of the United States Capitol and sing God Bless America, and 6 minutes later, the U.S. government denies any responsibility for the reported explosions in Kabul that I just mentioned.
Oh, the patriotism.
Yes, okay. Now, at 8:30, all right, this is now, they had the whole day, I guess, to talk about it, or to think about it. President Bush addresses the nation, and this is what he said. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist attacks. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. And the search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. As Bush speaks, members of Congress tell CNN that during private briefings with senior administration officials, they were told that the administration had enough evidence that it was confident the attacks are the work of Osama bin Laden and his Al-Qaeda, which was the first time we mentioned it, by the way, officially in public, terrorist network. Al-Qaeda, in fact, just means the net, okay, or network. That's all it means.
That was the work experience kid that put that together, right?
Yeah, I guess that's true.
He did some Googling and found someone, yeah.
Now, we have here a nation whose security apparatus failed completely to predict, or allegedly failed completely, to predict any of these attacks. But within hours, right, on the same day, in fact, they know who did it. They know who did it, even though someone else claimed responsibility for it, even though bin Laden himself never claimed responsibility, which is something that he would have done, of course.
Yeah.
Imagine how many fighters and how many jihadis he would have drawn to his cause if he had said, "Yes, I did this. Look what I can do to America. Come and join me." You can't
Mekhi,
buy publicity like
that's
that.
huge. I'd never
It's
thought
massive.
of it that way.
You, of course. I mean, that's why the ISIS fighters broadcast the beheadings. It draws the jihadis to their cause. Look, we are doing something. We're not just talking about it. We are fighting back. You know, we are fighting against the great Satan, which is United States, right? That's how they, that's how they're perceived by these
right.
fanatics. Now, why wouldn't you take responsibility? Of course you would. You'd be a fool not to. Anyway, as Bush speaks, members of Congress tell CNN that during private briefings with senior administration officials, they were told that the administration had enough evidence that it was confident, okay, that the attacks were the work of Osama bin Laden. Just to repeat this again, okay, that's what they said. At 9 p.m., 1 hour later, President Bush meets his full National Security Council, followed by roughly half an hour later by a meeting with a smaller group of key advisors. Can you say the Project for New American Century? Bush and his advisors have evidence that Osama bin Laden is behind the attacks, and CIA Director Tenet says that Al-Qaeda and the Taliban in Afghanistan are essentially one and the same. No. Bush says, tell the Taliban we are finished with them. Now, this is a little cryptic. You know, what does Bush mean by that? We've put together some information for you guys, which we won't be able to share today, around the timeline preceding the 9/11 attacks, and why Bush would say we are finished with the Taliban. Just very quickly, though, the Taliban were in negotiations with the United States and several corporations to allow the building of a pipeline, okay, which they then reneged on and wouldn't have a part of. Okay, so we will come to that next week, though, but bear that in mind. So it's actually not incongruent that Bush would say we are finished with the Taliban. Okay, taken out of context, you think, well, what does that mean? It doesn't make any sense to say that, right? What do you mean we're finished with them? It would make sense to say we're going to finish them. That makes sense, right? Because they're the evildoers. But no, we are finished with them, as in we will no longer negotiate. Okay, now 11 p.m. After 13 hours, the NYPD, the Fire Department of New York, finally dig out Will Gimeno. They learned that Port Authority Police Sergeant John McLaughlin is also trapped, and they dig him out at 8 a.m. the next morning after he has been there for almost a day. So these are some good, good news stories, I guess, as well. Now, Dave, what happened at 11:30? This is probably the significant statement of the day.
Before sleeping, President Bush enters into his journal, "The Pearl Harbor of the 21st century took place today. We think it's Osama bin Laden."
Whoa.
Now,
Boom.
yeah, that's right. Boom, indeed. I mean, that's that pops, doesn't it?
Yes.
It really does, and that makes me so upset. Is that that it was seen as the Pearl Harbor. We know this backstory to Pearl Harbor and all of the other wars for that matter, and this one got the people on side. But the fact that he's saying we think it's Osama bin Laden.
Yeah.
Into his
Absolutely.
own journal. Crazy. It's crazy
Yeah.
talk.
Now, earlier, there was a statement made in the official timeline that we have evidence. That's what they said. We have
That's
evidence it was Osama bin Laden. Now, the CIA would later state that they have no evidence at all against Osama bin Laden, which is why they actually never formally charged him. Okay, he was of course the subject of manhunt because you need to put a face to the evil, or the perceived evil, and then go from there. Now we want to take it a bit further though, now guys, because we've got a bit of time. That's great. There's a site that we found which has put together the top 5 9/11 facts that everybody should know, and when we went through that, we agree with that. So we want to share that with you. Of course, we will make that website available to you as well, and I'm going to just paste the link into the show right now, so into the chat. So guys, in the chat, this is the link to this particular website. So the first thing that you should know about the attacks is the Building 7 question. Why did it fall? This 47-story building fell on the same day as the Twin Towers, yet it was never hit by a plane. Dave has spoken about this at length. There was a small fire with the cause never fully explained. Then, in the early evening, it collapsed, and the video of the collapse shows it going straight down, so it's collapsing on its footprint. The 9/11 Commission does not have much to say about this collapse, and the mainstream media never really mentions it. No plane hit the building. Why did it collapse? How? Now the red flag has been raised here, okay? But because nobody's talking about it anymore, nobody really investigates anything about it, and I've seen a lot of debunking about it. None of it I find convincing, even in the least. I think people might just forget about it. So this show is about not forgetting. Sorry, what's the next one, Dave?
This is the Pentagon. No plane debris. And I have to agree with this one, just like I do with the other one. And for me, it really says everything. And witnesses at the scene who were in the building and had to crawl during the chaos report no sightings of any plane debris, no cockpit, no engines, no seats, nothing. Worse, the Pentagon is the most secure building in the world, and in 2001, that would mean hundreds of cameras on full-time recording events outside the building. Not only by the Pentagon itself, but by the myriad of buildings around the Pentagon, yet not one video of a plane flying extremely low and hitting the building. Not one. That's the start, right? All we have is an explosion and a hole with no evidence of a plane hitting the building. These are the facts. Worse,
Yes, sir.
Professional pilots, including ex-Air Force pilots, report that there is no way they could have flown that plane that low at that alleged speed and hit the building. Yet, the 9/11 Commission says it was an Arab pilot who could hardly fly a Cessna who did the deed. Finally, the only evidence that we do have of the plane that was hijacked comes from a phone call from Barbara Olson to her husband, Theodore Olson. Barbara Olson was a Republican conservative employee of Fox News, and her husband, Theodore, or Ted, was a member of the Bush administration as a United States Solicitor General from 2001 to 2004. In legal terms, these people are not exactly at arm's length. Under cross-examination, would be deemed biased and not credible witnesses, yet these two were the only connection we have to a plane hitting the Pentagon. Remember also, everyone, that the camera footage was retrieved and never disclosed from both the service station and the nearby hotel roof.
Yep. That's correct. We never saw the thing that actually hit. We never saw it. I mean, if it was a plane, well, then sure. Oh no, it will. What did they say? It would compromise the ongoing investigation. Well, it's been 13 years, right?
I don't
how
think
much
any more investigation is required.
Right? I mean, I don't want to be flippant here, but Dave, you're right. I think we've reached the pinnacle of our investigative abilities, haven't we?
I think so. Take the Shanksville, Mackie.
Yeah, Shanksville, again, no plane debris, okay? In fact, there's no evidence at all that plane hit the ground. We spoke about this at length as well, and Dave has shared this with us. There just seems to be burnt dirt and some shrubbery and some metal shavings, if you will. Now, the first videos are no longer available, so we're left essentially with what the officials tell us about it. According to the Shanksville mayor, Ernie Stahl, though, okay, there was no plane. He told German television in March 2003. That's Mayor Ernie Stahl. He said, "My sister and a good friend of mine were the first ones there. They were standing on a street corner in Shanksville talking. Their car was nearby, so they were the first here. And the fire department came afterwards. And everyone was puzzled because the call had been that a plane had crashed. But there was no plane." Okay?
Absolutely. You know, I've got some slides up here, and there's a composite of what a plane would look like on the scene. And
Yep.
we talked about this at length, but
And no
only
bodies.
there's no bodies, nothing. And then a couple of days later, they said they found the black box flight recorder, but there was no other debris. What,
Now,
it slipped into the ground?
It must have, right? No, yes. It disintegrated on impact, just like the two World Trade Center towers just disintegrated into fine powder. Now, bear in mind here, and I don't want you to go and look it up on online or whatever, but the recent crash of the Malaysian airline in the Ukraine, airline in the Ukraine, left us with a lot of debris and a lot of bodies. So I looked at some of the uncensored footage on some of the news channels that are available online. It was quite gruesome. But I can tell you now, this plane apparently broke up in the air. Okay, so and then the debris was scattered widely. So if something impacts the ground, I would have imagined that the debris spread would be much less, in my mind, right? I could be wrong here, and there should be some bodies to be. In fact, this whole body thing is really irking me, because as far as I know, there were no bodies recovered of the passengers that have been identified out of the World Trade Center, out of the Pentagon, or out of Shanksville. So where are those bodies? Right? I mean, that really bothers me, because it's a big hoo-ha now on the Malaysian airliner to get the bodies released, so the relatives can have closure and so on and so forth. Right? That's it's a big thing. It was a big thing then, but it was ignored to some extent. Dave, what is next?
Oh, I just got a slide I want to show everyone. This is what it looks like when an airliner normally hits the ground. There's debris in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and colors, and there's people and bits and pieces and windows, and they're very similar to the MH17 wreckage, which I think they got right for the first time when faking something. So look, that's going to get people offside with me, but yeah, you do a radio show, all right. So, what are we doing? Is this number 5, Mackie?
Number 4, sir.
Number 4, excellent. Okay, so this is the WTC Towers planes and collapse. At 8:46 a.m., the government says 5 hijackers crashed American Airlines Flight 11 into World Trade Center North Tower, 1 WTC, and at 9:03, another 5 hijackers crashed UA 175 into the South Tower, or building number 2. Average Joe Blow witnesses on the ground say they saw planes hit the building, and clearly from the video evidence from both mainstream media and the amateurs on the ground, we do see planes hit the buildings. But the plane markings are not clear, and thus we are not sure if these or those planes were in fact the planes that the government said were the flights. What we do know is that Larry Pullet Silverstein procured a lease and of the WTC in 2001. He won the bid despite being outbid by a rival. As it happens, Larry Silverstein also had the lease on building number 7. That's the music, and that's the show for today. You'll have to stay tuned for the other versions, the other parts of this. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Dave from Shiny Side out.
Mackie out too. See you all later.